Jerry Lawler is Memphis wrestling royalty, a man known for his sharp tongue and zero tolerance for nonsense. Backstage, he commanded respect, but he wasn't exactly everyone's favorite guy. The King's ego filled rooms, and crossing him usually meant catching his cold glare or worse. Hatred wasn't something he threw around lightly, but when it happened, it cut deep. Matt Striker and Andy Kaufman earned Lawler's full-on venom. Others, like Bret Hart, Koko B. Ware, and Terry Funk, didn't make the hate list, but managed to get under his skin enough to cause real friction. This wasn't your usual scripted TV drama. This was backstage heat, the kind that could make a locker room tense enough to snap. In a business built on egos and power struggles, Lawler's mix of respect and ruthless no-nonsense attitude earned grudges as much as admiration. Behind the scenes, his sharp tongue and fierce pride sparked plenty of backstage tension and drama. This video digs into those grudges and simmering backstage heat that defined the King's reign. Even legends have enemies. They just don't always admit it out loud. Jerry Lawler doesn't hate often, but when he does, he goes full throttle. Matt Striker earned that rare distinction. The King saw Striker as a walking headache, a self-important wannabe who didn't get wrestling's unspoken rules. Striker's attitude grated like sandpaper on a sunburned ego. Lawler's contempt wasn't quiet. Backstage, he made it clear Striker was on his permanent ignore list. The locker room knew Striker was walking on thin ice, with Lawler's sharp tongue ready to slice through any nonsense. Striker's attempts at self-promotion and acting like a big deal didn't impress the King. If anything, it made him the target of Lawler's scorn. Striker's ego was bigger than his wrestling skills, which explains why Lawler treated him like a referee at a punk show, ignored and unmissed. Striker tried to play the smart guy card, but Lawler's experience and streetwise instincts saw through the act. To Lawler, Striker was the kind of guy who read wrestling like a textbook but had no idea what it meant to actually be in the trenches. That disconnect rubbed the King the wrong way every single day. Jerry Lawler's hatred for Matt Striker wasn't just personal, it was professional and cultural. Striker's vibe clashed hard with everything the King stood for. Wrestling isn't just about moves and promos, it's about respect for tradition, the locker room, and the grind. And Striker? Lawler saw him as someone who thought he was above all that. Striker's problem was his attitude. He came across as a know-it-all, constantly correcting vets and questioning booking decisions. For a man like Lawler, who built a career on paying dues and respecting hierarchy, Striker's behavior was not just annoying, it was disrespectful. Sources backstage said Lawler viewed Striker as a smartass who didn't understand the realities of wrestling beyond the script. Worse, Striker was seen as a guy who tried to play both sides, acting like the locker room friend while also cozying up to management. Lawler hates a phony, and Striker's attempts to curry favor with the brass while disrespecting veterans set off all the alarms. The King reportedly called him out openly in locker rooms, reminding him that respect isn't something you demand, it's earned. There were also complaints about Striker's work ethic. Wrestling is brutal, and Lawler felt Striker wasn't putting in the sweat and toughness the job demands. The King respected toughness above all, and to him, Striker looked like a guy who talked a big game but folded under pressure. Lawler's frustration reached a boiling point when Striker openly questioned the booking and status of other wrestlers, including some of Lawler's close allies. This wasn't just backstage gossip. It was a direct challenge to Lawler's authority and Memphis wrestling legacy. Striker's ego was so inflated it needed its own tag team partner, and Lawler was ready to tag him out. The locker room divided. Some appreciated Striker's new school mindset, but many sided with Lawler, seeing Striker as a threat to the old guard. Eventually, Striker became isolated, and Lawler made sure his influence was minimal. In wrestling, being on the King's bad side isn't just uncomfortable. It's a career killer. For Matt Striker, Lawler's disdain was the kind of backstage heat no rookie survives. Ultimately, Striker's backstage standing never recovered. The King's disdain was no joke, and in wrestling, that kind of heat means a guy is better off staying out of the spotlight. Jerry Lawler's career spans decades, and with that comes a long list of wrestlers who tested his patience. These guys weren't outright hated, but they earned Lawler's eye rolls and sharp remarks backstage. Bret Hart's precision and uptight style clashed with Lawler's rough Memphis vibe. The King found him stiff and hard to work with, and their backstage relationship was filled with tense moments over style and respect. Bret's by-the-book approach grated on the King's more laid-back but tough mentality. Then there's Koko B. Ware, known as the Birdman. Koko's laid-back attitude and occasional lack of focus annoyed Lawler. The King preferred a no-nonsense work ethic, and Koko's relaxed style rubbed him the wrong way. It wasn't hatred, just persistent irritation. Terry Funk was another, because two strong personalities in one locker room never mixed smoothly. Funk's wild, hardcore style sometimes clashed with Lawler's territorial pride. Their disputes mostly centered on booking and ring time, making for some heated backstage moments. Even Mark Henry wasn't immune to Jerry's irritation. While respected for his strength, Henry's slow pace and sometimes unmotivated attitude frustrated Lawler. The King expected every wrestler to bring fire, and Henry occasionally fell short of that mark in Lawler's eyes. And, of course, Chris Jericho. When early in Jericho's career, his arrogance and swagger didn't sit well with Lawler. Jericho's confidence was seen as borderline disrespect, leading to some icy backstage moments before their relationship warmed up over time. Andy Kaufman wasn't a wrestler. He was a Hollywood comedian and TV star best known for Taxi. But Kaufman had a strange obsession with pro wrestling, specifically intergender wrestling, where he'd challenge women from the crowd and smugly declare himself the World Intergender Wrestling Champion. The stunt got laughs, boos, and attention, which was exactly what Andy wanted. Lawler, already the king of Memphis wrestling, didn't mind publicity, but he did mind outsiders who didn't respect the business. To him, Kaufman was an attention parasite, playing wrestler for laughs while guys like Lawler bled for the sport. The moment Kaufman stepped into Memphis territory, Lawler's patience wore thin. In 1982, the two collided in the Memphis territory. Kaufman's Challenge the Women act was a hit with the crowd, but Lawler saw an opening to give him a dose of reality. They worked a match where Lawler famously hit Kaufman with 2 piledrivers, moves outlawed in Memphis, and sent Kaufman to the hospital. Here's the thing. The line between real and fake blurred fast. Kaufman sold the injury for months, wearing a neck brace everywhere, even on national TV. But off-camera, the tension was legit. Lawler didn't enjoy dealing with Kaufman's diva antics or constant need to script everything. The King thrived on spontaneity. Kaufman treated wrestling like a late-night comedy skit. They even went on Late Night with David Letterman, where Lawler slapped Kaufman live on air. That slap wasn't entirely acting. It was Lawler sending a message. The feud made Memphis wrestling national news, but it also left scars. Lawler resented Kaufman's approach, feeling the comedian made a mockery of the craft. Kaufman, for his part, leaned into the heat, sending Lawler letters and prank calls just to push his buttons. When Kaufman died in 1984 from lung cancer, Lawler was still processing their rivalry. He later admitted that much of it was showbiz, but not all. The slap, the trash talk, and the verbal jabs came from a very real frustration. In the years after, Lawler came to respect Kaufman for his commitment, but the bad blood was never fully forgotten. Kaufman called himself the intergender champion. Lawler just thought he was the heavyweight champion of getting on his nerves. This feud remains one of wrestling's most infamous clashes between a purist and an outsider. And the fact it still gets talked about 40 years later proves how real that heat was. Jerry Lawler's locker room wasn't a tea party. It was a battlefield where respect was earned, patience was thin, and grudges ran deep. The King's hatred for Matt Stryker and Andy Kaufman was real, sharp, and unforgiving. The friction with Bret Hart, Coco Beware, and Terry Funk kept the tension simmering behind the scenes, proving that even legends aren't immune to backstage drama. In a world full of egos, Lawler ruled with a cold eye and a ruthless tongue. Cross him, and you didn't just face the King in the ring, you faced his wrath backstage, too. That's why his reign still echoes in wrestling history, marked by respect, fear, and a whole lot of heat. If you enjoyed this deep dive into backstage wrestling heat, smash that like button like Lawler smashes his opponents, and subscribe for more shoot-style stories that expose the real wrestling world. No scripts, no fluff, just raw heat.